Hey, what's up, guys? We have some good Armored Core 6 news here. So a Korean interview just dropped, and thanks to this Reddit post, this person here, shout out to Saintriot, this person has translated the Korean interview, so we're able to check it out. I've already read it, but I'm gonna give you the interesting new details that have been revealed about Armored Core 6. So the first question goes, as you're releasing your first title after 10 years, there's a lot of excitement internally. I'm sure there are high expectations, blah, blah, blah. What kind of experience did you want to provide? Here to quote exactly, to be more specific about the action from software, it involves observing and defeating enemy movement. We wanted to keep the game mechanics of the Armored Core series alive while utilizing the know-how of From Software in terms of overcoming difficulties. By incorporating the best of both worlds, we hope to present a gameplay that will appeal to a wide audience. They want to utilize the know-how from their Souls games, so to me, like reading between the lines, it sounds like, you know, they're trying to incorporate a more Souls-like mechanic, especially when it comes to fighting bosses. One of the goals of Armored Core is dynamic action using mechs. What were some of the game design challenges that you faced in creating this dynamic action? Please answer in terms of level design. So here Yamamura is putting the emphasis that the mecha action genre lets the character move in three-dimensional space, which would otherwise not be possible with a human character. So they wanted to make it possible to move back and forth in the air, shoot and charge, and do other things. In previous interviews, it was said that Armored Core 6 is a return to the roots of Armored Core. I'd love to hear what the developers think is the essence of Armored Core. So Yamamura basically says that for them, the essence of the Armored Core franchise goes back to the assembly portion of the game. So building your own robot and having the assembly have a direct impact on gameplay. So it's a process of optimizing yourself for the challenges the game presents. It's not just about game mechanics, it's about the joy of building an aircraft. By extension, it means that the world is defined by the pleasure of strategizing. So very different concept from Souls. It's basically, you know, setting up your robot or your mech before entering a mission and appreciating all the details and intricacies that come into that. They also describe it here as some sort of character building, right? The combination of parts shapes the player's strategy, which in turn shapes the actions in terms of game design. It must have been a challenge to create such an interactive relationship between parts and action. What did you pay attention to when organizing this? So here they put an emphasis on legs control and weapon control. So the legs control movement and the weapon control the action. Mixing and matching parts and experimenting is a big part of the fun of Armored Core. On the other hand, it's also quite complex and takes some getting used to. Are there any features to compensate for those new to the series? So a question for the newcomers. So they wanted to make it as intuitive as possible, and they also wanted to train people as they were going through the game. So basically, you know, get players to learn how to play the game as they play the game, which is definitely a good thing. Armored Core has a lot of parameters, but at its core, they think it's a title about the fun of assembling and coloring parts. During the assembly process, they wanted to help players understand the game mechanics. So, like we mentioned, training the player as they go along. And so they made sure to give them a good idea about how the assembly process works. In the early missions of the game. There's also the ability to test assemblies in action with simple mecha, making it easier for newcomers to the series. So for those of you who are familiar with the Armored Core genre, you know, there's nothing too special here, but for the newcomers, basically you're going to be able to practice with your mech to test different things. There's going to be different loadouts you can test with, and so on and so forth. So you can learn the game as you go along. Okay, so next question. I'd like you to elaborate more on how players will be able to strategize. Okay, here this question gets a little bit lost into translation, but basically they talk about swapping parts and strategizing. So how will they incorporate the swapping part and the assembly into strategizing? So the answer is there's many missions in Armored Core. However, they want to make it clear that not all the missions are difficult, and there are enemies in the game that are less powerful than your armored core, and defeating them is part of the fun. However, they also understand that some people are looking for challenging bosses and tactical action. Therefore, in terms of boss battles, they have prepared some difficult bosses for us to tackle. And these difficult bosses are handled by assembling your mech and strategizing before entering the mission. For instance, they give some example here. So some bosses attack with multiple lasers, and if you find it difficult to avoid them, so which you can avoid them, you can then change your leg part for, let's say, a high jumping leg part that jumps very high in the air to more easily avoid them. Or another strategy would be to switch to a leg part that uses different boosters. Or another tactic would be to use, like they say here, a bazooka, so I'm assuming a grenade launcher with good guidance to prevent the laser from firing. So basically staggering the enemy before it fires. So different ways to tackle a difficult boss, and in this sense the game is a fun way for players to come up with their own solutions to deal with the threat of the boss. Here they talk about the AC grip. Armored Core has a meme called the AC grip. It's not really used, but it's a reference of how unwieldy they are. This has changed with the addition of numbering and new controller system, but it's not simple. I'm curious to know if the control scheme will change in this installment. And if there will be support functions that the player can choose from. So basically what's going on with the Armored Core controls, or the control layout in Armored Core 6, and we actually get a pretty good answer here. Yamamura first of all says, he talks about the AC grip, that the development is aware of it, and that this led them to trying to make the controls more intuitive by default. So it is possible to customize the button layout, no surprise here, but by default the controls are similar to those in recent From Software games. However, there is a difference with the Soul series. So here we get an idea of what is going on here, and we get some new information. So L1, L2, R1, and R2, each 4 of these buttons are assigned to a weapon. So as you guys remember in the trailer, you can see there's a part in the trailer where you can see a quad hovering in the air, and it's shooting its rifle while firing missiles. And that sort of gives us gave us a hint that you could fire multiple weapons at the same time. But we get confirmation here that you can use all 4 of your weapons at the same time, and each weapon is assigned to the triggers and the bumpers. So you get L1, L2, R1, and R2. So all 4 of these buttons are going to be assigned to a different weapon and a different attack. So very interesting piece of information here. We did not really know this was a thing, so this is quite interesting, and I'm looking forward to trying out Armored Core 6. It's going to be quite interesting to fire that many weapons. For those of you who are new to the series, this is a new feature. Before, you could only fire 2 weapons at the same time, as well as your shoulder unit, so technically 3 weapons. But here it sounds like we're going to be able to fire more weapons at the same time than ever. So looking at the evolution of the series, Armored Core 5 has seen a lot of changes. Unlike its predecessors, the 5th installment has no radar, and gravity limits the height of your boost. Will Armored Core 6 be more like the 5th installment in terms of movement and radar, or will it be more like the 4th or 3rd installment? So this is another interesting answer. I'm going to read it exactly how the translation says it. I can't say for sure, but in terms of average movement speed, I'd say it's somewhere between Armored Core 5 and Armored Core 3. So in terms of movement, similar to 5 and 3, but however, this time around, the enemy encounters are more intense and the action is more fast-paced. So I think the instantaneous speed will be more on par with Armored Core 4, which is the fastest in the series. So you'll be able to feel a more thrilling combat pace. I'm going to be honest, I'd like to hear your take, guys, on this, because he basically says it's like 5 and 3, and then afterward he says it's like 4. To me, like, this whole paragraph says, you know, it's basically a mix between all the Armored Core. So I'd like to hear how you guys interpret this. Obviously, this is a translation, so I'm sure the exact wording would kind of be important here, but, you know, seems like it's going to be a mix between, you know, 3rd gen, 4th gen and 5th gen, but oh well. And then there's another bit of information here that's important. Elements such as gravity are organized like in previous series. Unlike Armored Core 5, you can continue to ascend as long as you have energy left. So this reminds me a bit of the 3rd generation. So the fact that you can ascend as long as you have energy left, and as much as it does not seem like it's this type of speed as Armored Core 4 from the preview, this definitely reminds me of the 3rd generation when it comes to their description of ascending. So as for the radar, we're working on feature that will make it simpler to see where your enemies are. So I'm reading between the lines here. I think he is referring to SCAD mode. So if I had to interpret this in my own way, I would say it's likely the radar is not there and you're gonna have some sort of scan mode feature. So this is how I read this. Tell me guys, how do you think this will play out? What do you think the movement is going to be like? They pretty much describe all 3 series, but afterward they get to describe the way you ascend in the air. To me, sounds similar to the 3rd generation, which I really enjoy. So tell me what you think about this. New information, interesting stuff, but let's keep on reading. In Armored Core 5, we tried to give multiplayer a little more weight. How will the multiplayer be implemented in Armored Core 6? Are there any plans for server environment, seasonal system like in previous games? In the video, you're shown working with other players in the story. Will we be able to enjoy cooperative play in single player as well? So they pretty much ask about multiplayer and PvP as well as co-op, and unfortunately they give the same response as usual. For now, we will be revealing details about multiplayer at a later date. So they're not showing all their cards yet, but it is likely that there's going to be more information about PvP. Otherwise, I don't think they would be repeating that they're going to reveal more about multiplayer later. So my guess here is that we still have some surprises left when it comes to multiplayer. I'm excited to know what else they have in store for us, but for now, we're just gonna have to speculate. So next question, Amends Romance. Will we be able to see the hovered weapon appearance in Armored Core 5? So I think here, little translation, I think they're referring to the ultimate weapons that pretty much one-shot in Armored Core 5 and Verdict Day. And how many types are there? Can you introduce one representative one? Will the special range attack at the end of the video be included in the ultimate weapon? So, you know, a bit of a mess translation wise, but the answer says it all. As you said, hovered weapons are definitely something that can be called a romance. So when they say can be called a romance, they mean that it's kind of like a one-time deal, and people that fell in love with it, it's like a short love, right? So basically confirming that the ultimate weapons will not be in Armored Core 6. So, however, in terms of battle design, it was not adopted for use in battle in this work. So the hovered weapon or the ultimate weapon is more of a one-hit wonder. So it did not fit with the main focus of the game, which is to create your own combos. Instead, the focus is on combining multiple weapons that create your own moves and combo. So personally, I'm extremely happy about this news. I was not a big fan of ultimate weapons in 5 and Verdict Day. If I had like one critique of these games, it would be that, because the sort of like one-shot aspect kind of removed a lot of the fun from these games. Like if you can just kill an enemy in one shot with an ultimate, it kind of defeats the purpose of fighting them, you know, close quarter combat and outmaneuvering your opponent. So personally, I was not a big fan of ultimate weapons. I know some people loved it. So I am extremely happy about this news that they are not making a comeback and that they are focusing on combos as well as other things. So really happy about this. This is also new information. So things like the spark attack at the end of the trailer are a weapon mechanic. So in the trailer, I think when they say the spark attack, I think they are referring to the primal armor explosion, right? So this time around, each weapon has its mechanics, some of which can be modified. In light of this, it's all about the parts and the player movement, which is beautiful, amazing. So in the process of creating large fields and battles, you must have been thinking about different gameplay style than in the previous series, such as an open world. Why did you not go open world? Why did you keep the story mission as a way to complete the game? And then they answered, while we were developing the sequel, there was some discussion around making it a different game style. However, after such discussions, they decided that they did not want to make a title that was centered on moving around and exploring, just like Elden Ring and the Soul series. So at the end of the day, the Armored Core series is how about you assemble your character and how movement affects your gameplay, because that is what makes the series compelling. It's designed to make you think about how fast you can move, jump with your boosters, and the combination of those parts will determine how high you can reach, how far you can go, and in this respect, they felt that the exploration aspect compared to Souls was not a good fit for Armored Core, basically. So this led them to conclude that Armored Core 6 would be more fit for a mission-based structure. So I am kind of putting in my own words some of these responses because these are translated, and so we don't really get a completely structured sentence here with the right words. So I'm kind of putting some words in between the lines here, but the idea is really the same. So to finish, there's still a lot of love about Armored Core's ability to find your way around. You'll still find the same style of dynamically moving around in a three-dimensional map with lots of elevation changes. We hope that the players will enjoy this aspect, and I think you'll find a different kind of enjoyment in moving around and exploring the nook and crannies in these well-crafted maps. So there's still some exploration. It's just that, mission-based structure, the exploration will be on a mission-to-mission basis in the maps they created. So that's it for this interview. So a little recap, the interesting bits that I noted from this were mainly not the disappearance or the fact that they removed the ultimate weapons. I think that's a big deal. The fact that you're going to be able to use all 4 of your main weapons at the same time without having to switch between them, that's also a big deal. I'm sure there's going to be more details around that. Perhaps some weapons are going to be, perhaps some weapons are going to work differently. Perhaps you're going to have to switch it to main hand for some different things. We'll have to see. I'm suspecting, because I think we've seen in the trailer, you can switch the weapon bay in the back, and then you can also see in the trailer that they fire missiles at the same time than firing rifles. So I'm really interested to see how this works out. And then finally, another bit of information that I thought was really interesting in this was the way they talk about the speed of the game, and the way they pretty much confirm that you're going to be able to move vertically as long as you have energy. So we're getting away from the stick to the ground, you're stuck to the ground from Armored Core 5th generation, and this feature sounds to me very similar to the old OG generation, so 3rd generation and earlier. So this is, to me, really good news. Really happy about that. Tell me, guys, what did you think was interesting in this interview? Is there something that struck you? And I want to hear your thoughts on what do you think it's going to play more similar to, because in this part they pretty much say, yeah, it plays like 5 and 3, but it plays like 4. So anyway, so these are the new bits of information we got from this interview. Again, shout out to this Reddit article. I will leave it in the description, and I hope you guys enjoy. Thanks everyone. Have a good one.